Hi guys, Claudia Boleyn here, and today we're talking about episode 7 of WandaVision. It was too short. It was way too short. There had been a rumour going around for ages that the last 3 episodes were going to be an hour long each. That's not a thing. Yeah, I was up really early this morning. I was up at like 7 o'clock and I kept refreshing Disney Plus and it was made available like dead on 8, and the first thing I saw was 38 minutes. And you know, most of the credits are the most frustrating thing because they go on forever. So the whole time you're watching, you're thinking, right, I've got to factor in the intro and the previously and then the end, and oh my gosh. But I'm pretty sure that the last 2 episodes are going to be extra long ones because we know we've got way more of the show to come than would fit into like 2 30-minute episodes. So they're probably going to be like 50 minutes, an hour long, the last 2. Okay, so obviously, spoiler alert to anyone who hasn't watched it. Why haven't you watched it? Go and watch it now. But this was our Modern Family, The Office episode. It also kind of reminded me of a series of unfortunate events, but like the newest version of that TV show. But something that I really love about this series as a whole and like what it's taken from the comics is that it's the first time I think I've actually seen them use Wanda and her kind of like mental health issues and tied that in with her powers and made it all a thing, because sometimes in the comics it can come across as a bit ableist or like they're just using her powers and her trauma for the plot points and then they don't really go there. But this show is actually really delving into it. Like in the comics, Wanda has felt before like a sort of metaphor for mental health issues, and she has had a breakdown, but it hasn't really been got into until quite recently. But obviously in this episode, like the link is clear. So if you read the comics, you may have noticed in this episode that we may have seen the beginning of the Maximoff mental illness, the Maximoff family mental illness. That whole family, like the poor family, like they struggle very much from mental illness in that family. Obviously in the comics, I've told you in videos before, but I'll just recap briefly. So Wanda has breakdowns, she's a highly emotional person. Because of this, the other Avengers are scared of her because she loses control of her powers, and because they don't show her compassion, like things often go wrong. Stuff that could be avoided if they had just shown her that love and compassion. And actually, there's a storyline, House of M, which I've spoken about before, but Pietro gets so much stick for this because the Avengers are planning to kill Wanda because she's having a mental breakdown. She realises her children are dead and she can't control her powers, and they are scared that her powers are going to overload and that it's going to do harm. So instead of going to Wanda and talking to her and like going to see her, they actually plan, the lot of them, that they're going to go and murder Wanda. Not all of them. I mean, like, Spider-Man says no, and Captain America, lovely Captain America, says no. But a load of them are going to do that. So Pietro hears about that. Him and his dad Magneto have currently got Wanda at this point. Wanda's having a breakdown. She's just, like, in bed crying. And Pietro goes back to her, and that's why Wanda alters the reality in House of M. Because Pietro goes to her and says, look, they are going to kill you. I don't have the power to protect you, our dad Magneto doesn't have the power to protect you, like this is the only way that you're going to stay alive and that we can stay together. And ever since this time, because in House of M, Wanda says no more mutants and the mutants lose their powers, everyone in the Marvel comics has hated Pietro. Like, he's loved by fans, but the characters in the show hate him because of the whole, you know, mutant genocide thing. But, you know, but he really was only doing that because they were going to kill Wanda and it was the only way that they could be together, and because of the trauma that they'd had in their lives, they just thought, right, maybe Wanda should create a world in which we have a good relationship with our father and he gets what he wants and maybe he'll love us. I mean, I'm not completely sure about that characterisation. Like, there's parts of House of M where I think it's a little bit too much like, oh, we're just little kids and we're messed up by our dad. Like, I don't necessarily think that's completely Pietro and Wanda, although obviously, like, that's a part of them. But yeah, in the comics, like, her mental illness is treated, like, quite badly by the other characters. And in the new comics, she does actually see a therapist. I mean, he turns out to not be a therapist, he's a baddie. But yeah, she does see a therapist in the comics, and Billy kind of inherits this from her. So even though he's kind of not biologically her son, he's kind of like her reincarnated, like the soul of her son. He also has like anxiety, he's very much like Wanda, he's emotional, he gets like depression sort of things. Like, you always get the impression with Billy that he's kind of on the edge, and thank goodness he has Teddy, because Teddy, his future husband, they're married in the comics now, that's Hulkling, kind of like evens him out. And that's kind of very similar to what we have with Wanda and Vision, because they both kind of go for that hero character. I was going to say superhero, but everyone in this universe is a superhero. But they go for that sort of protector, that steady saviour character. So they're really quite similar. And in Young Avengers, like, Billy is willing to, like, he has really low self-esteem, and he is just willing to kill himself in Young Avengers. He has to be stopped from killing himself because he thinks it's the only way. Like, he doesn't have a second thought about that. Like, Billy can get quite dark, and him and Wanda have that in common. And then with Pietro and Tommy, like, it's less overt and spoken about, but in Pietro's life he has like real issues with his interpersonal relationships. Like, he finds it really hard to fit in. The only person in his life that he actually trusts is Wanda, and he's a dad at the moment in the comics, so he's got a daughter called Luna, who he had with an Inhuman called Crystal, who actually cheated on him with an estate agent. But his story at the moment is kind of trying to focus on him trying to move forward from his past and the trauma of him and Wanda, because they were built from trauma. They were outcasts together. He looked after Wanda all his life. Terrible things happened to them. He was always that protective figure, but it gets to a point where Wanda is kind of standing on her own 2 feet and she doesn't need Pietro so much, and that's kind of hard for him. He tries to be a dad to Luna. He never had like a father figure that he could really look up to because of like Magneto, and he gets a lot of things wrong, but he's trying really hard. So I would say that Pietro also displays some sort of mental illness issues, and the similar thing we see in Tommy, because Tommy is very much like Pietro. Tommy is more upbeat, you know, he laughs a lot more, he's a lot more like Quicksilver from the X-Men, I've said that before, but they still both have that kind of cynical lack of trust, like I don't really want to show my emotions kind of thing. So it's a Maximoff problem. So we have Wanda in this episode who is basically going through a mental breakdown, as she has been the whole time, but she can't maintain her reality anymore. So obviously everything is changing around her. I mean, is it that she can't maintain the reality, or is it that somebody else is changing the reality? Who knows? But we actually see, even though it's like within the kind of sitcom setting and it's like played for laughs, we've got a Wanda who won't get out of bed, her kids are worried about her, Billy is saying he's hearing stuff, like he's hearing voices, his head sounds really noisy, and Wanda can't cope with it. She comes downstairs in her dressing gown, and this is obviously the perfect opportunity for Agnes to creep in and be a kindly friend and neighbour and take those kids away and look after them. We'll get to Agnes in a minute, but also our advert this episode was Nexus, and it's actually an antidepressant, so they're making it very overt that, you know, this is a mental illness, not just in like an analogy, like it is a mental illness story. But it's interesting as well that they called it Nexus, because there's been some debate about this morning. Some people are interpreting it as Nexus being like the pathway between multiverses, because that's kind of what it is in the comics. But also I think it's more likely Wanda is what is called a Nexus being. So she's like a super powerful magical being, where in the Marvel universe, that is where the magical energy is sort of drawn towards. So she is that being. So she is incredibly powerful because she can alter reality, and I don't know why she's a Nexus being, but she is. And that's also interesting in terms of Billy, because the children of a Nexus being can have like insane powers. So Billy is actually kind of going to have the powers of a god, like more so in a way, because he can change realities, he can walk through realities, he's going to create gods in the Marvel universe, he's going to become the demiurge. So Wanda is like this pinpoint on the universe map of all the sort of magical power. So she's powerful, and Billy is possibly even more powerful than that. I don't know why Tommy didn't get any of that. Poor Tommy. But then neither did Pietro. Okay, so Agatha. I was totally caught off guard with this, which is ridiculous because like from the very start I was suspicious of this woman, and then like in the last couple of episodes it turned around and I was fooled, and now I feel so stupid because like I really thought when she was in the car with Vision, like the signs were there, like she was able to talk when the others weren't, but I just thought, oh, poor Agnes, like maybe she too is a victim of this situation, she can't leave. Oh my lord. I think the villain reveal for Agnes and the song is probably the best villain reveal I've seen in ages. She reminds me a bit of the Handler from the Umbrella Academy, but even like slightly better and kind of cooler. Like, I love how campy it was and how she was really hamming it up. I really love everything about this show. It's just so... it's so weird and so wacky, and I'm not saying there aren't other shows like that out there, because there are, but in terms of like the genre that it's in, and it being this part of the Marvel universe which doesn't usually kind of do that sort of thing, like it's great. Like you don't know what they're gonna do. They can just put in weird things like that. So of course she is Agatha Harkness, and I think most of us knew that anyway, like regardless of whether we thought she was good or bad or what she was doing there, we were right, she's Agatha Harkness. And now we have more questions because she's got this weird like dungeon lair under her house in the basement, and it has like, I mean, we have to talk about Mephisto, of course. Like, through this whole series, everyone has thought, well, Mephisto could be the big bad. So last episode, I thought that maybe Mephisto was Evan Peters' Pietro, and that was how he was influencing Wanda. But we've now seen that, unless it's a trick, Evan Peters' Pietro was being controlled, but not by Mephisto, he was being controlled by Agnes. But I still feel like Mephisto's going to be a big part of this because, like, if you look in, like, Agnes's basement, on one of the, like, witchy pillars, there's, like, a devil's face. I mean, there was a fly in her house, and I know we've said before, I think I've mentioned this before, in the comics, like, Mephisto can take on the appearance of animals, he can pretend to be animals, and he actually is a fly in the comics at one point. So, I mean... Unless it's just like a creepy addition, I'm pretty sure that probably is Mephisto. There's still some debate about whether Evan Peters could be Mephisto, if the fly also exists, or is Mephisto the rabbit? Like, who knows? A lot of people getting very cocky and saying, we knew Evan Peters' Pietro wasn't Mephisto. And like, you're probably right, but also, like, we just don't know at this point. Because obviously Pietro turned up again at the end, and he seems to be like Agnes's minion. Unless, of course, he is Ralph. So if we assume that Ralph is Mephisto, we didn't see him and the fly in the same shot, is he the human form of Ralph? But if that's the case, if that is the case, then why would Agnes or Agatha need to be, like, conjuring him to go to Wanda's door? Like, what's that about? Is this the X-Men Peter that's been grabbed by Agnes or Agatha and made to act like Pietro? Like, I don't quite understand it. I still don't know where they're going with it, because they're going really heavy on the imposter stuff. Like, I love it, by the way, because you know my worry was that they were gonna take away Aaron Taylor-Johnson's Pietro. And no, he is our Pietro. He is the Marvel Cinematic Universe's Pietro. He's perfect when you look at the comics and the wonder they've got in the MCU, their relationship together, beautiful. And you can't just replace him as Quicksilver, and that is not what the show's doing. So, like, regardless of who Evan Peters' Quicksilver is, he is not our Quicksilver, and he's not, like, in that role, which is delightful. But they went super heavy on this, like, they mentioned it a lot. So we have Wanda telling the twins, the poor twins, by the way, asking, what happened the other night, you know, with Uncle P? He said Dad was dead. Then Wanda suddenly drops the bombshell, like, don't believe anything that man says, he is not your uncle. Like, with no further explanation. How creepy that must be for those children, because he was living in their house. Vision asks Darcy about who the imposter Pietro was, and Monica also says to Wanda that that wasn't actually Pietro. So, like, they are really, like, you know, drilling that into us. This is not our Pietro. Don't worry. Aaron Taylor-Johnson's Pietro, even if he stays dead, like, he's not getting replaced. We have our Pietro in our hearts. Wanda herself realises that that man is not her brother, it's not the twins' uncle, and he can't replace him, okay? You can't replace him. I mean, I still pray, like, constantly, like, I still hope that he will turn up, and it might be that he can't. I mean, there's that conversation between Monica and Wanda, I will talk about Monica in a second, but where she's talking about grief and how you have to, like, understand your truth because the grief that you suffer makes you who you are. And it's a great message, and usually I'd be thrilled, but I kind of don't like where that's going, because it's kind of encouraging Wanda to just, like, come to terms with her grief and to lose everything, like to lose Vision and the kids and Pietro, the real Pietro. I would much prefer, and I really hope this can happen, maybe if Wanda combines her powers with Mephisto's, or she takes power from Agnes, I don't know. The spell book, which we don't know, is it the Darkhold, is it one of Doctor Strange's books, like we don't know what that book is. If Wanda can combine her powers with that force, then I'm hoping that not only can she bring back our Pietro, obviously the boys, bring them into the real world, which we know is probably going to happen anyway, bring back Vision, who is absolutely fine and not dead, and also I hope she can bring back Maria, because Haywood is dodgy, he can't lead S.W.O.R.D. We now have Monica Rambeau, who is the coolest superhero with, like, the coolest superhero origin in the whole MCU so far, and she's going to be way too busy being an actual superhero to be in charge of S.W.O.R.D., so someone's going to have to be in charge of it. I know they could give it to Jimmy Woo, but I don't think, I love Jimmy, I don't think he's ready for that sort of power. So I think it would make sense if she could maybe bring Maria back for Monica as a sort of token of, like, apology, and it would just be it would be lovely, because we never saw the goodbye between Maria and Carol, and it would just be nice to have that, you know, to see them interact again. I don't know, it's probably wishful thinking, but I really hope. Okay, so Monica Rambeau. So she has now become Spectrum or Photon. Again, debate over the name. Her mum was Maria Photon Rambeau, but in the comics she's Spectrum. Spectrum kind of sounds a little bit cooler, but I am now attached to Photon, so I don't know. I think it's nice that she might carry on her mum's legacy. I absolutely loved the sequence where she is, I said it before, she is like a Doctor Who companion, because you can't keep her down. She's so much like Carol in the sequence where Carol's a little girl getting knocked down and she keeps getting back up, because you cannot keep Monica down. Like, she walks through that thing, she walks through the barrier, and when she comes out the other side, like, we know she's got her powers, she has no idea, but what she's actually seeing is she's seeing electricity, because that's what Spectrum or Photon does and is, that's her power. She is like one with electricity and like radiation and all that stuff. And she is powerful, because we saw her facing off against Wanda this episode. Now, I kind of feel like she was holding back, so we didn't really see the full extent. And to be honest, so was Wanda. Like, Wanda was not aiming to really do harm. But she must be powerful, like Captain Marvel levels of powerful, because she could withstand Wanda's energy blast. So, I mean, I'd like to see them fighting side by side. We saw her at the end of the episode discovering, like, Agatha's weird lair slash dungeon, and Evan Peters' Pietro kind of seeing her, and her eyes turned like a purpley blue, and I don't know if we're supposed to interpret that as, you know, the energy because of her powers, or if she's also being like taken control of, in which case are we going to see her battle Wanda? I would like to see them fight alongside each other. I just think that would be so good. There are theories from people that because we have got potentially Evan Peters' Peter, that maybe might actually be him from the X-Men universe, that he's been brought in by Agatha. We do have theories from people that Vision's going to be able to wake him up and he's going to fight alongside them, and like, as much as I would love to see a scene with Quicksilver fighting with the family, I would much rather see the real Quicksilver, like, you know? I want to see Aaron Taylor-Johnson's Pietro, who is like the arrogant uncle that like Tommy has kind of beef with because he idolises him and he wants to be him, but also Pietro's too competitive to ever let his nephew win, and I want to see that. Like, I want to see him with Billy. I have these dreams of like seeing the real Pietro just appearing and saving the twins for Wanda, because like it would just be so amazing. I mean, I don't know why they wouldn't bring Aaron Taylor-Johnson in. Like, this is the thing I keep thinking about, because he could easily have been used, if this is a multiverse like Pietro, like they could easily have used him anyway and just made him act differently, and the thing could have been he looks like Pietro but he doesn't act like Pietro, and that's how Wanda realises, and that would actually make more sense, wouldn't it? So, and I think Aaron Taylor-Johnson has said he wants to come back, so unless there is an issue with him like not wanting to come back, I still don't see why he wouldn't be in it. Also, like the fact that Wanda said like that man is not your uncle to the twins. I mean, I still have hope that Billy might be able to use his powers, which are huge, and, you know, bring in his uncle to save him. Like, I would love to see it. I would love to see Pietro and Billy and Tommy content. I don't quite understand what Agatha's game is, to be completely honest. So we have like, in the comics, she has a son called Nicholas Scratch, I believe. And there's speculation, like, from me too, that maybe Evan Peters' Pietro is like nothing to do with looking like X-Men Peter, and maybe that is just her son, but then why would she bewitch him? Like, I don't understand. Because her son is a wizard too, and he's actually a big villain in the Fantastic Four comics, and he has a lot to do with the Fantastic Four. We didn't see Monica's engineer this episode, although there's somebody who designs stuff for space, so it is looking like it could be Reed Richards, it could be Blue Marvel, it could be Riri Williams, but I just feel like the fact they've hyped this so much, it will probably be somebody that we would be expected to know about, and people would know a lot about the Fantastic Four because of all the other films that have been out. That particularly terrible recent film, which is, you know, I don't want to be too negative in these, but, you know, possibly the worst film I've ever seen in my life, honestly. But if Reed Richards is going to be brought into this, if the Fantastic Four are going to be brought in, which would make a lot of sense, it would also make sense to bring in like an adversary for them, which, you know, would be potentially Agatha's son, because it is in the comics. So, you know, that could be a thing. I would like to see Evan Peters in this universe because I like him as an actor a lot. I just don't want him to be Quicksilver. Like, I need that to be Aaron Taylor-Johnson's thing, okay? But I don't understand what Agatha's doing, because, you know, if she like made the Pietro, the fake Pietro, like ask loads of questions, and he said that his aim last week, like just casually, he said he was there to give her grief, you know, to play a part and give her grief. But why? Is she using him to make her, like, continue with this world? Like, why does Agatha want Wanda to maintain this world? Is it because Agatha was killed in the Salem witch trials and she wants to continue living even if it means being a bit evil and mind controlling people? And I think we're thinking now that when Norm was woken up by Vision and he said, she's in my head, I think we're now starting to think that that was probably Agatha and not Wanda. Like, I just don't know why Agatha would be doing that, because in the comics she is like a friend and a mentor to Wanda, and yeah, she's a bit dodgy in the past and there's some issues with her, but you know, she is a mentor to Wanda, especially in the newest Scarlet Witch comic series. She walks the witch's road with her, you know, she is like her guide and her mentor, and they're close friends. So I don't know, like, they could still turn it around, they could have her being controlled by Mephisto too, you know, why is she working for him? Like, I still can't quite figure it out. Like, what would she want? Why would she be doing this? Like, just being evil isn't a reason, you know? Like, why would she want Westview to exist? Why does she want Wanda to extend it? Why is she using her mind? Like, what's the end game? Is she trying to open the multiverse? Is it because she's lost someone she cares about? Is it because Ralph, her husband, Mephisto, can't maybe get into this universe properly? Is she trying to open the multiverse to bring in Ralph, her husband? Like, we just don't know. Like, there's so many questions still, and there's only 2 episodes left. And I mean, I really love Agatha. Like, she's very, like, she's iconic. I really like her. I don't know what it is. You will understand if you're, like, bisexual or pansexual or lesbian. There's a thing about female villains. She suddenly became extremely attractive this episode. Did anybody else get that, or was that just me? Maybe it was just me. Maybe lockdown has gone on too long. But yeah, if she does anything to hurt those boys, those lovely little kids, then we're done. Me and Agatha are done. Also, in terms of the kids, we had Tommy in his little green outfit today, which is great because last episode he was in blue. In the comics, his like iconic costume is green, and obviously Billy is in kind of like blue and like sparkly. It's kind of like a spandex suit that's like dark blue, but it has like sparkly constellations on it, and he obviously has his red cape. So it's nice to see that they're keeping Tommy in green, and hopefully when he becomes like a young Avenger and we see him as a teenager, he will be in a cool green outfit. Okay, I think that's it for today. I only watched it this morning. There's probably going to be so many new theories by the time that this goes up because I made this like on the day it came out, like really early. So yeah, let me know if you have any further theories, although no spoilers please. If you have spoilers, I don't want those. But yeah, love you loads. I will see you really soon. Okay, bye!